Hello, your tens. This is Mr. Backlaw, and welcome back in today's science lesson. In today's science lesson, we're going to be doing a feedback session on nutrient cycling, which was a lesson that we did last week. And I have assessed your work, and we're going to be looking at what went well in that lesson and what we can do to improve on some answers. So at this point of the lesson, you should have completed the connect task, and you should have also have read what went well and even better if. And we're going to be focusing on this today. So the first EBI point 1, is to learn the different processes of the water cycle. And you can see in this question over here, describe the process of 1 and 2 in the water cycle. This is one of the questions that came up. So we're looking at processes 1 and 2. Now, I'm going to show you some of the answers that I've got, as I usually do. We're going to examine these answers and see if they earn a mark, and see if we can improve it to get the full marks if it needs to. So some of the answers I've got. So let's have a look at the first one. The water is at sea level, the surface of the sea, then evaporates into the clouds or sky. So they do have a point that yes, the water is at sea level at first, at number 1, and then it goes up. Yes, and I like that they used a keyword which is evaporate, because that's one of the processes here. Unfortunately, this would probably just earn just 1 mark because they've only mentioned one of the keywords, which is evaporate. And they actually need to describe what evaporate is. What is evaporation? And if you remember in the previous lesson when we talked about water being heated, turns into gas. So when water as a liquid turns into gas, this is called evaporation. So that's what's happening in number 1. It's water is turning into water vapor. So water vapor is the gas. So they only get 1 mark for this one. Maybe they might not even get a mark because they didn't describe evaporation. However, well done for trying. The next one is process 1 is evaporation. So yes, good that they just said evaporation. And process 2 is the water condenses. So this time they've got the other keyword, which is condense. So well done for saying that. So we have condensation for the second one. So number 1 is evaporation, which is this one here. And the second one is condensation. And condensation is when gas turns into liquid. So the water vapor is turning back into a liquid because the air cools. Okay, so the water vapor cools down and then it turns into a cloud. So you can see here it is turning into a cloud. So I would say this person would probably also get 1 mark. Despite saying the 2 key words, they didn't really describe what is happening. And it's important to note what describe means again. So describe is to recall facts, processes, events in a factual way. Okay, so you need to say what is exactly happening, what processes is happening in 1 and 2. And you need to say this. In evaporation, liquid turns into gas. In condensation, gas turns into liquid. So let's look at the final answer. And they wrote a bit more detail in this, so I can see that they probably earned a lot more marks than the other 2. So they've written down the first process called evaporation. This when a liquid turns into gas. So well done for saying that. So evaporation is when liquid turns into gas. Water evaporated from not just water, so there's a spelling error there. So just is UST. Also from rivers, lakes, the energy from the sun's heat. So just make sure you put an S and cover that, apostrophe there. The surface, and the process number 2 called condensation. This, so always put is here. This is when gas turns into liquid by cooling. So the air cools down. To be more precise, you could say that the water vapor cools down and forms into clouds. Okay, but yes, this will get definitely 2 marks if this is a 2 mark question. They have the keywords, which is evaporation, and they also have condensation over here, and they describe what is happening. They described it over here. So well done for doing that. I'm going to show you another model answer. So again, very similar. Process 1 is evaporation. That's when the sun's energy causes the water to evaporate into water vapor. So that's process number 1. And then process number 2 is condensation. And again, that's when the water cools down and turns into clouds. Now I'm going to remind you what process number 3 is. Process number 3, that is transpiration. And that is when water from the leaves is evaporated into the air. Okay, so water from leaves evaporate. Okay, and this is happening in plants. So again, it turns into water vapor, so it turns into a gas. And again, it could also condense and turn into clouds. So number 3 is transpiration. Number 4 is going to be precipitation. Precipitation is when the clouds become too heavy and it ends up turning into rain. So it can turn into rain. It can turn into snow. It can turn into hail. It can also turn into sleet. So it can turn to any of these things as long as water is coming from the clouds and going back into the land, back to earth. And then number 5 is what we call a runoff. And the water is going back into the water sources such as the rivers and back into the ocean and seas. So these are the other processes. So transpiration is number 3. Number 4 is precipitation, and number 5 is the runoff. You can also watch the previous video from the previous lesson. That would also have a clearer picture of all of these processes together.